This piece of crap was released on my birthday. Well, happy birthday to me. As somebody who was a massive fan of the first Five Nights at Freddy's movie, I came into this movie with, how should I put it? Microscopic expectations? I mean, aside from the puppeteering work of the Freddy Fazbear's animatronics from Jim Henson's Creature Shop, the film had, basically, little to nothing going for it. An abysmal plot compartmentalized of convoluted subplots, each one of them feeling different from the movie that you are watching, motivations of our main and supporting characters that don't even make any sort of sense at all, and are written to make them look like some of the dumbest walking survivors in a horror movie. The horror relies on predictable, formulaic jump scares and off-screen violence in a franchise that relies on jump scares and macabre imagery. And the movie fails to make the animatronics in any way scary and would rather have them attack random goons off-screen and not the main character because the plot says so, or taking part in a, oh my gosh, the fort building montage. That was a thing that actually happens in a Five Nights at Freddy's adaptation. I commend Scott Cawthon's persistence of turning a point-and-click independent survival horror game into a pop culture phenomenon to the point of becoming a feature-length film adaptation. But, as many of us learned from Chris Stuckman's Shelby Oaks, just because you have massive ambitions for your passion project doesn't mean that you are going to make a good movie out of it. But, with the adaptation profiting extremely well off of a measly $20 million budget, it was inevitable that the bane of horror movie production, Blumhouse Studios, will return with a much anticipated sequel. Enter Five Nights at Freddy's 2, the next installment in the franchise that this time is adapting the second game in the series, which is said to be both a prequel and a sequel of the first game. A prequel set in the 1980s that literally came out 2 months after the first game was published. The gameplay was practically identical to the first one, including getting fired after completing all of the bonus nights, with the exception of adding 2 new mechanics into the game, having a wind-up music box to calm down the marionette, and a mask to hide yourself from Freddy Fazbear's gang and other animatronics. 2 features in this movie that we'll definitely talk about during this review. The filmmakers of Freddy's cinematic debut are back once again, and Tammi is still in the director's chair, but this time, Scott Cawthon is in the driver's seat. The peculiar part is that unlike previously, where he was co-writing with other people, he is the sole writer for this project, and has overarching creative control for the entire franchise and whatever tale that he wants to be approved. But what especially surprises me is that he also took the time to ask for feedback. I mean, can you imagine, in the wretched quagmire that is Hollywood, a filmmaker actually asking its own audience for feedback? But yeah, Scott actually took it upon himself to ask his own fans and community for feedback on how to better his writing capabilities to hopefully this time deliver a bone-chilling plot while giving the fans exactly what they wanted. So, have any changes been made in Five Nights at Freddy's 2? Did the franchise improve in any way? The answer's not going to surprise you. Look, I understand that this movie wasn't made for critics or reviewers like me who are not in tune with the Five Nights at Freddy's lore, and is just designed to placate to fans with Easter eggs and characters that they remember so fondly. But I believe, and even the fans got to admit, that they deserve better than one of the most sloppiest, discordant, and downright boring movies of 2025. Five Nights at Freddy's 2 is what happens when you give a prominent figure to the franchise unlimited creative freedom, script approval, and free reins to conceive whatever he wants, only to realize that during the production of this stinking cesspool, it turns out that he has no freaking clue what he is doing. Scott Cawthon is the captain on the steering wheel driving his ship. And once again, his ship has hit an iceberg. With that out of the way, what does Scott Cawthon have up his sleeve this time? We resume our miserable trek in this franchise in a sequel that takes place 2 years after the original. Vanessa still trying to reconcile and overcome her trauma of her father being a serial killer. Abby is missing her ghost friends that are inside of the animatronics, and she's afraid that she might not be able to see them again. And Mike Schmidt, well, he just exists. Well, okay, he's also trying to move on from the events of the first movie while also trying to protect his little sister. But one day, through her toy communication device that she received from Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, Abby receives a message from what turns out to be Chica, not just from the Freddy Fazbear's Pizza they were before, but from the original pizzeria that came out in 1982. Unbeknownst to her, the animatronics, or what many refer to these versions as the toys, are being controlled by the spirit of a little girl named Charlotte, the very first child that was killed by William Afton, who takes on the form of the marionette from Five Nights at Freddy's 2, with the plans of taking revenge on those that wronged her. Like I said before, one of the biggest problems in relation to Five Nights at Freddy's the movie was how overly convoluted and dreadfully written it was. The plot and character motivations that drove the story don't make any sense whatsoever. Its established rules and mechanics are bungled to say the least and make up their logic as the movie goes along, and the plot twist and final act destroy the entire film. I'm sorry, I'm still not past the fort building montage. Otherwise, he has a clear concept of what Easter egg and reference from the game he wants to include in his story, whether it makes sense or not. But when it comes to actually constructing a story, considering the fact that this is the same man that not only made, I don't know, 7 or 8 games, and a grand total of, and I shit you not, 45 books, most of which are dedicated to expanding the lore and are longer than the likes of such literary works such as Animal Farm, Lord of the Flies, and The Great Gatsby. Nothing in Five Nights at Freddy's 2, as far as generating its own gateway horror project, is built on any semblance of cause and effect. He cannot translate from one scene to another without a blatant contrivance, characters not behaving the way they should given their established characterizations and arcs from before, or making up its own rules as they go along, because the movie thinks that everyone in the audience is stupid. The exact moment that the film descends into complete retardation happens at scene 1. Yes, the very scene of the movie that gives the origin story and the clear motivations of the main villain of the movie. Not Springtrap, not William Afton, Charlotte. With her spirit haunting the original pizzeria in 1982, her goal, her primary motivations, is to kill all adults and parents. Why? Well, what happens, get ready for this, is that while Charlotte is waiting for the marionette to show up on stage because she doesn't have any friends, she notices that William Afton, that is dressed as Springtrap, aggressively snatches and lure a little boy into the back room. Charlotte does what any kid would do when they're being faced with trouble and go to talk to the parents to ask for help. And how do the parents respond when they are confronted and hear a little girl crying for help when she notices that a little boy is being abducted into a restricted area? There you go. Kid, go talk to your parents. Go talk to your parents, okay? Not now, scared child that is clearly in distress, hinting that something might be wrong. I'm busy. Us moms are having a conversation right now. Shoo, little girl. The adults are talking. Who cares if we're in an era where stranger danger is still a thing? They didn't say it exactly like that, but you get my point. You want to know the worst part about the entire scene? Okay, during the opening credits, we flipped through many newspaper articles about the event that happened, with one of them stating that Charlotte gets blamed for her own death because she wanders into a restricted area by herself. That is hilarious. So are we supposed to believe that she purposefully stabbed herself in the back 3 times and dragged a defenseless boy onto the stage? The police in this movie, especially during that incident, are so inept that they didn't even bother to operate any kind of thorough detective work, process of elimination, nothing. They couldn't even ask the kidnapped child after he's been unconscious who took him and what he saw. All of it was just an accident. But hey, at least the pizza place gets closed. So yeah, this is our villain's motivation, to take the lives of adults and parents because they ignored her cries for help. Aside from that ridiculousness, I know that I'm not a connoisseur of the Five Nights at Freddy's lore, but from what I read, isn't Charlotte supposed to be the one that protects the children and avenges those that died at the hands of William Afton. If anything, she should be more concentrated in getting vengeance on him rather than just taking it out on absent-minded parents. Maybe they're gonna save that for the third movie. Aside from the baffling introduction, the whole movie is compiled of meaningless and effortlessly resolved subplots with payoffs that are meant to be impactful, but are so half-assed that it makes the entire plot thread a waste of time, nor does it do anything to evolve the characters. For example, Abby has a subplot that involves her trying to win the grand prize of her science fair. What does it do to advance her character? Nothing. Well then, why does it exist? Simple. So that an animatronic can go kill Wayne Knight, who plays Abby's contemptible robotics teacher, who belittles her and is obsessed with the school's robotics winning streak. Look, I like Wayne Knight in this movie, but it has nothing to do with the character having any depth to him whatsoever. Five Nights at Freddy's 2 also does a poor job of executing Vanessa trying to conquer her trauma with her father being a serial killer and her childhood growing up. I understand that trauma can affect a person's life. In fact, some deal with it longer than others. However, the execution on how the film resolves her character arc is so easy to accomplish that it makes you wonder why they even put it in the movie to begin with. It's like, wow, you spent 2 years reminiscing all those terrible memories and you keep getting fake visions of your father reappearing in your everyday life? And that's all you had to do? Why didn't you fix all of your issues like you did in this movie in the first place? And this subplot gets resolved around the halfway point. As for the main character of the first movie, Mike Schmidt, like I said before, he just kinda exists. He doesn't really have a whole lot in the second movie other than watching out for his sister, trying to protect her, and this timing have an on and off, will they won't they relationship with Vanessa. Will they still trust each other after the events of the first movie? Will they go their separate ways? And it's just as half-hearted and witless as you would expect. The script has to contrive them to not trust or believe each other just to force in conflict, even though that within that time span of 2 years, they would have probably gotten to know each other and would have trusted each other's lives. Never mind the fact that both Elizabeth Lale and Josh Hutcherson's performances are wasted on a subpar, sleepwalking script. As for the actress, I also need to bring up, because I forgot her previously, Piper Rubio as Abby. She is just not good. The delivery is very delayed and dull, and none of her dialogue comes across as believable or natural. I didn't usually dogpile on child actors, but I hope that in due time, she will find a script that actually shows off her strengths as an actress, as opposed to this sludge. It's also filled with coincidences, left, right, and center. Oh no, Vanessa's car broke down after being attacked by Mangle. But not to worry. Mike's friend just so happens to arrive at the exact location she happens to be at, just to give her a ride at the exact same time she needs it. Lucky for Mike, there just so happens to be a mask sitting on a chair that he can use to fend off the animatronics trying to kill him that apparently have facial recognition software. How do animatronics, even prototypes, have facial recognition software from 1982? That's just... On top of that, the movie is so sloppy with its storytelling that it doesn't even have a climax, let alone a third act. But what it does have towards the end is a hidden reveal about Vanessa's family, where she just so happens to have a long-lost brother named Michael who wants to follow in his father's footsteps. And his plan that he wants to establish to carry on said legacy is one of the most befuddling, rolling on the floor laughing plans he could ever devise, that it makes you bewildered as to how he is ever gonna get it accomplished. And just when you think that the film could go into a very harrowing direction, don't take that as a compliment. While you're in suspicion as to what's gonna happen next, credits! The movie's ending literally pulls a skyline, you know, aside from the slideshow action sequences. It's so abrupt and anticlimactic, and with how poorly paced this whole movie is, it feels like the movie closes itself just as soon as it was going to reach the third act. By the way, Skeet Ulrich is in the movie for a good 3 minutes. He's not only just in the film to pander to those thirsty Scream fans because of the fact that he and Matthew Lillard are both in the same movie together, but to deliver a laundry bin of exposition about the daughter's death, the restaurant's history, and to offer a MacGuffin to the main character of the movie that he can use in order to save another character's life. Which, by the way, Spoiler alert. Why didn't Mike keep using the spirit box to calm down Charlotte's evil spirit? Why didn't Vanessa also tell Mike about this since she gave a music box to her as well? The answer is, who cares? Scott Cawthon sure doesn't. Then there's that question lingering in the back of your mind. Is it No. It's not. The atmosphere and the aesthetic of the entire franchise is severely lacking. The ambiance and mystery is non-existent, and when are filmmakers and production companies gonna arrive at the conclusion that just because you put in a jump scare with an additional loud noise or musical note to it doesn't mean it is instantly scary, especially if the audience can see every single one of them coming a mile away. It's a short-term hormonal shock that invokes the fight or flight response, not by the unpredictable fear of what could happen or the tension surrounding the scene. I know, jump scares are a huge component of the franchise. But when the jump scares in your Five Nights at Freddy's movie is not all that good, something is very wrong. There are some remarkable and terrifying horror movies that know how to make an effective jump scare. Films that rack up the dread and the atmosphere surrounding the situation of the scene until it crescendos and catches you off guard with a jump scare that will be burned into your brain. Five Nights at Freddy's 2 jump scares are like the equivalent of an unscary haunted house. The movie's version of a jump scare is someone popping in from around a corner for no particular reason other than the fact that we need to manifest a cheap jump scare, or somebody turning slightly around the corner only to see a person standing right in front of them, all of which are followed by a loud noise and musical cue. As a guy who doesn't even like horror movies despite many exceptions, it's just such amateur filmmaking. And once the animatronics finally get to do their dirty work, the studio does its absolute best to hide all of the gore and blood in the movie because they need a PG-13 rating in order to appeal to its younger audience. Not to mention, these animatronics, the toys, and others like them, apparently have the ability to teleport like Batman to wherever the victim just so happens to be, despite the fact that they make the loudest clanging metal noises every time they take a step. Every other horrifying set piece to jolt the audience or to make a character next in line to the slaughterhouse is painfully contrived and telegraphed because all the script requires all of the victims and protagonists to do is have them be the stupidest human beings walking. For example, remember the mask that I mentioned not too long ago? The mask that Mike Schmidt uses in order to protect himself from the prototype animatronics facial recognition software? He never once considers to keep wearing the mask at all times. Meanwhile, he is trying to deactivate the connection that all of the animatronics have with each other, shutting them down instantly. It's basically ghost Wi-Fi, which would never work anyway because they're all being controlled by the spirit of a dead girl. Screw it, who cares? It literally makes the entire scene completely redundant. Not to mention that rather than just pressing one button that shuts them all off instantly, even if it doesn't work, he's too busy communicating with Vanessa as to where the animatronics are in their neighborhood. Mike, what are you doing? Turn them off! But hey, at least we get to spend 5 minutes of Mike essentially playing Five Nights at Freddy's 2 for the audience, which makes it all worth it. Secondly, this is one of the sillier ones. The movie introduces a televised ghost hunting group called the Spectral Scoopers, which kinda sounds like a haunted ice cream joint. I mean, at least with Shelby Oaks, Paranormal Paranoid sounds like a very plausible ghost hunting group. Somehow, Blumhouse Studios just so happens to make a more worse-sounding version of a paranormal investigation team than Chris Stuckman. Anyway, once they arrive at the haunted pizzeria, the original Five Nights at Freddy's, this ghost hunting group that is established on television while Abby is watching one episode of recording everything together decide to separate like a Scooby-Doo mystery gang. Film! What are you doing? As per usual, they all get killed one by one. And one of them, I'm not kidding when I say this, while walking through the river ride tunnel, accidentally falls into the water like an idiot, and whenever he hears something plop into the water, or that something dangerous could possibly happen to him, he doesn't just hop out of the water. And by the way, the water is up to his waistline. It is ridiculously shallow. It's one of those horror movie tropes of characters being so stupid for the sake of the plot that it makes you want to walk right up to the big silver screen in front of a movie-going audience and say, "Get out of the pool!" If you thought that instance was stupid, it doesn't happen once, but twice. Only this time, they survive because they come up with the centuries-long thought process of them getting out of the pool in order to avoid something going to kill them. As if the horror element of Five Nights at Freddy's 2 wasn't bad enough, did they even try with the comedy? There are jokes that are told in this movie so poorly that it makes the audience wonder whether or not they're supposed to laugh. For example, Vanessa rescues a group of adults that are being attacked by Toy Freddy and Mangle, and they ask a man who is actually Aunt Jane's lawyer to stay with them for the night, to which he replies that he'll do it, but with the collateral damage over there, they're gonna need a good lawyer. And that's it. That was the joke. Did you laugh? But of course, we can't go without saying some commendable aspects about the... You know what? This is just a gimme at this point with the animatronics. Jim Henson's Creature Shop work for the animatronics is pretty solid. We all know this. The animatronic designs are robust and are very faithful to the games, despite how unscary they are in execution. They operate their movements and other features of their body on command very well. But like, at the end of the day, all I'm doing is respecting the capabilities of Jim Henson's Creature Shop to make all of these models for a movie that wastes their talent. There's nothing else that needs to be said other than this. Five Nights at Freddy's 2 fails at 3 separate categories. It fails as a horror movie because the film never takes advantage of the film's premise of killer animatronics hunting people, never has a semblance for atmosphere, and all of the jump scares are pathetic. It fails as a video game adaptation because of its complete mishandling of references and important components from the game that are crowbarred in without any coherence or logistical execution. But more importantly, it 100% fails as a movie. The plotting is horrific, the characters make no damn sense and have a complete lack of development, and the horror elements popularized in the game are all non-existent. The problem is, no matter what I say, no matter how continuously lazy that Scott Cawthon's script writing is gonna be, no matter how bare bones and lifeless the atmosphere and scares are, no matter how many Easter eggs and references the filmmaker needs to contrive in order to pander to all of the fans watching it, the series will continue to make more money. Believe me, my good viewers, once this ride is over and it ends in a trilogy, we will have more sequels and spin-offs to the Five Nights at Freddy's universe for years to come, and the fans will continue to follow its deleterious and dismal quality like lemmings jumping off a cliff. Okay, they don't actually throw themselves off a cliff, that's all a myth, but that's not the point. It's one of the worst movies of the year, undoubtedly and unquestionably. A boring, loathsome, diuretic pile of metallic feces that suckers horror enthusiasts, fans of the games, and the average movie-going public. My name is Luke Nukem, and you might...